Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be taking us through the builder today. Today, we'll be talking a little bit about autofill and the autocomplete function and how to use that. We'll also talk a little bit on how you'll be able to autofill into a paragraph widget as well, based on the information input by the patient. But let's go ahead and get started with that. We'll go down to the Packets and Forms page. And we'll be working off of our FormDr training packet today. So we're going to click the three dots on the right side of that and click that Edit Forms button. That will take us to step one of the builder, where we can add or remove any tabs from the packet. And if you are looking to remove any tabs from your packet, you'll just need to select the three dots on the right side of the tab you want to remove and confirm that deletion. When you have the tab set to where you like, we'll go ahead and click that Next to Build button. That will take you into the builder where we can update the form itself. Now, when talking about the autofill, all that you're really going to need to do is just ensure that the two fields that you want to, the two elements that you want to autofill with each other just share the same field name shortcodes. And what I mean by that is, if we were to hover over this address widget here, we can see that orange pencil icon that pops up for it. We can click on that. And when we go down to the field name area, we see here, these have been set to custom field names. As you can see, they say address, city, state, and zip. But if we were to add any new inputs, or if you were to add any new widgets to the form, you'll have a randomized series of letters. That shortcode is going to be randomized just to ensure that there's no unwanted autofill happening on your forms. So it will use a randomly generated one that is not being used anywhere else in that form. It does not have to be that random collection of letters. As mentioned before, these have been changed. It will not allow for any spaces. However, these will be those field names moving forward. That being said, that field name can only be used once in each form. So any other text field that has address as the field name is going to autofill with whatever information is entered into that address field. Now, as this widget has 4 inputs here, this is a single text field widget we found just under that patient name that has 4 inputs. So they've added 3 other inputs to it. All that really does matter here, though, is that field name. So we'll add 2 new text fields just so we can start fresh. And we can open them up and see those randomized shortcodes here. All we'll need to do is just copy and paste that into our other field name. Now these will both act as the same element, and we can go to that style page to get that live preview, and we can see this in action. So now whenever we start to fill out the information in that first text field, it will fill it out for all other fields that share that same shortcode. Now, it's very important to note that the patient name widget itself is going to have set shortcodes here. So if we open up that patient name widget, you'll notice we are unable to change those field names for the patient name. So the patient name will always autofill into the other patient name field. So it's also really important to note to only use that patient name field to collect the name of the person whose information you want that to be stored under, that submission. Because if we're using the patient name to collect, or the patient name widget to collect the patient name throughout the form, and then we also happen to use this widget for a guardian signature on the final tab, for instance, maybe this is a guardian name instead that we've just updated this to. Well, that won't change those field names. So as soon as the guardian enters their name into this widget, it's going to overwrite all of the previous ones as well. And if they don't go back in that form, then as soon as they sign that, they'll submit it, and then that submission will come in under the guardian's name instead. So again, only use that patient name widget to collect the patient name or the person whose information you're intending to store that under, and then all other names can just be taken with that general text field instead. And you can absolutely, maybe this is a guardian name instead, and we can drop a text field in here, and then we'll just title that guardian name, and then maybe we have first and last name fields. And then we have our shortcodes over here, but we can change these. Maybe this is going to be guardian first and guardian last. And then that way we can remember if we do have any other Guardian fields throughout the form, we won't have to go back to this tab to go in and copy and paste a randomized collection of letters that you'll never remember. So you can change those, but again, since we've used Guardian first and Guardian last now, we won't be able to use those shortcodes again for other fields unless we want them to be included in that auto completion for the Guardian name. But let's go ahead and go to our medical history form and just simulate another signature section. We'll go ahead and add our signature field, throw a group in there so we can format that, and we'll add another text field and a date widget. And then we'll update this again. Guardian name, last, and then we'll use those shortcodes again. Guardian first and Guardian last. If it is not working correctly, please double check your spelling. This will be case sensitive, and obviously it will need to be the exact spelling because they will be used to collect that information in the database. So just double check that while you're setting those up. But now once we have our Guardian name set up on two separate tabs, as soon as we start to fill that out, webinar test, then all of those will be filled out as well. So we can see that here. So you can have the same bit of information on multiple tabs, but the patient will only need to fill that information out one time. Typically, we'll see this most used with address fields or email address, social security number, something that the patient might need to fill out numerous times. And I always recommend just setting those up as auto-filled information, just so that it makes it easier on your patient to complete that form, and they'll be more inclined to complete all of the information that you will need from them. All right. Now we'll demonstrate a little bit how to use the autofill to autocomplete into a paragraph widget. So we'll go ahead and place a paragraph widget down, and just to show you what I mean, we could have this one set up as that Guardian name as well, just for consistency's sake. All right. And then what we'll do here, we'll just go ahead and get rid of that other text field. What we'll do here is we're going to get that Guardian name as they fill that out to display into a paragraph. So maybe this is a consent form or something like that that says I, and then we'll want that Guardian name. So we'll just put this in here for now. I Guardian name, consent to the above, whatever. What we're going to need to do to get this to autofill into our paragraph is we're going to use brackets. So we're going to use brackets to tell the system to pull that information from that widget. So for our Guardian name, we're going to replace that with two sets of brackets because we have two fields. So we're going to do one set for the first name, and we'll add a space because we want a space in there. And then we'll add a second set for the second for that last name. And now all we're going to need to do is just place those shortcodes into those brackets. So we'll take that Guardian first, and then we know that that second one is Guardian last, so we can just add that in. If you are just using those randomized shortcodes, I always recommend copying and pasting just in case an L is actually a capital I or something like that. But again, those will be case sensitive, and they will need to be exact. So if you're not changing those to something that more easily remembered, then absolutely use that copy and paste to get that right information in there. But once we have this set up with our two fields here, as soon as they're filled out on the form, then it will populate into that paragraph. When we go to the style page again, this is going to take us to a live preview of the form. And we can see here that it's going to default to whatever information is in that placeholder. So we have first and last. So it's just going to say I, first, last, consent to the above until the patient fills that out or that field has been completed. And then we could type in webinar test. And now it's going to fill in that paragraph with that entered information. So now it will say, I, the name entered, consent to the above. All right. And again, you're just going to want to use brackets for that. That won't be parentheses. That will need to be brackets. But anything in the brackets, our system will read as something that needs to be imported or pulled from another element. Another way that you can use the autofill is with selection option questions. And this is a nice way to have kind of multiple packets within one, whether that's, most typically I've seen this done with minor or adult forms or male or female. We have this sex question set up here, for instance, and we can open this up and we can take a look at this. We have two answers right here, male and female, and we have two different sets of conditional information within each one. I've just set these up to be visually different so that whenever we click on them on the style page, we can see that those are quite obviously different. But with the selection options, you can also autofill these as well. You just need to know that you'll be autofilling or auto-completing the selection itself. So it will need to share more than just that shortcode. It's going to need to share the same shortcode as well as the same values for the answer selections. The answer selection text can absolutely be different. This does not need to say the same answers. The only things that will need to be identical, again, are the values for the answer selections and that name field. So we can leave this one as yes or no, just to show you what I mean. But we can double check to make sure that the values are still going to be true and false. And then we're just going to copy and paste that shortcode right underneath the title where it says name. It won't be the values this time. It will look differently because in the text fields, that name field is found over here, but the selection options will have that value. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab that selection. And then now we can even have different sets of information in here as well. Maybe we'll just put a couple signatures in one of them, and then maybe a rating scale in the other, again, just for a visual difference. But now, depending on that first selection of that sex question, we can have different sets of information populated on each subsequent page just based off of that first selection. So maybe our second page is just a single question at the top like this one, and then we can have that all set up as well with that shared shortcode. So once the male selection has been made, we'll get the appropriate information that's conditional to that selection. And then also the second selection will have been made waiting for us, presenting us with that set of information as well. If we were to select the no here, then it will change that selection on the first question also, giving us the other set of information. We can go over a tab, and as long as those shortcodes are being copied over, that selection will be made on this page as well. So again, you can have different sets of information depending on specifics given to you by the patient as they go throughout the form, and you can get very dynamic with it. You can have multiple sets of conditional information. So as you can see, I have set up on this first question a minor question as well. So maybe it's kind of a layered conditional situation, and we can have the minor questions populate if needed, and then no, and we can also auto-populate that selection throughout the form as well. All right, and again, you will just be needing to copy and paste that randomized collection of letters under the name field. In the text field, it will be called field name, but in the selection options, it will just be called name. And you can do this with the selections for the other selection options as well. You'll just need to make sure that they have the same amount of answer selections and share, again, those same value fields. Now, you can also use the selection options to auto-populate into a paragraph based on a selection that they've made. So basically here, what we're going to need to do is use the shortcodes, again, in those brackets. So maybe this is not going to be a consent question. Maybe this one is the patient is, and then we're going to set those brackets. So now we can say, depending on what the patient selects, we can change these values because now we're going to copy and paste the shortcode into those brackets. And again, that is just going to be the selection made by that parent question. So we're just putting the parent question's information into those brackets. And now based on the selection of what they make, we can get an output. Let's go ahead and go to the style page so we can see that in action. And when we select male, the patient is true. If we select female, the patient is false. Now that doesn't make much sense, but if we remember that those values are set to true and false, then we can know now that it's the value that's going to be output into that paragraph. So let's go ahead and change these. The patient is a male. Patient is, oh, and we already have our period in there, so we won't need that. A female. You're going to go ahead and click done, back to the style page to test that out live. And when the patient selects their selection, the patient is a male. So now it's going to output that value for us. Patient is a female. And you can do this with, you could create an entire paragraph of some notes based off of selections that the patient has made. Just remember that if you are going to be auto-populating these throughout the form, that you will need to ensure that those values are shared as well, because now we can see that this single select option that we had set up with those signature fields is not selecting and it is not affecting our other question here. That is because while they do share those same shortcodes, they no longer share the same value. If we were to change this to a male and a female, then when we go back to the style page, they'll be back working together. So just keep that in mind as you're building them out. If you are going to utilize that autofill functionality, you can get very creative with it, and it can also make your life a little bit easier when you're collecting that information just in terms of how it's going to be displayed for you. But again, you'll have some options there. Just remember to always use those brackets for the shortcodes and not parentheses. That will be brackets. And then you can always update these shortcodes to be something else. Maybe instead of this randomized shortcode, we want this to be patient sex. It could even just be sex. It could just be S. It could be one letter, one number, as long as it's not being used elsewhere. Just remember, once you use it one time, you won't be able to use it again unless you want those fields to auto-populate. And just update those across the board, and we are good to go. Computer's got a little slow today. Apologies. All right. Let's refresh that. All right. And I will go ahead and open up that chat. If there are any questions today, I'm more than happy to get those answered before we close up. I know we're running a little bit towards the end here. But just know that you can utilize that autofill, and I will say, if you autofill the questions that most people find frustrating to have to fill out multiple times, usually it's the long ones where it's a social security number, it always seems to be an address field or a cell phone or an email address. Again, I always recommend just to set those up to autofill throughout the form, because once again, your patient will only fill that out one time. They won't have to touch it again, but you'll still collect that information on the forms, or the tabs anyway, that you need to collect that information on. If we go through this is set up from a template, so we will have changed all of those field names. As you can see, we have email address. There will be, oh, not that one, not that one, and not the date of birth. But you don't have to keep them as these randomized shortcodes. I see this all the time where people will use them, and then there will always be just one misspelling or one letter missing, and then you have to kind of go back through and dig through to make sure that each one is good. So I always recommend changing them if at all possible, or to just make sure to copy and paste those. All right. And now, since we're talking about the autofill function, we'll finish today talking about our rating scale widget and the calculation tool. This is kind of some bonus content on this, as we will have another webinar going over this more specifically. But it is a question that we get all the time about the calculation tool. And since it's intended to be used with the rating scale, we'll go ahead and use that for this demonstration as well. But I bring this up because the calculation tool will use the autofill feature, or the autofill functionality, and that will be how you get that calculation tool to work for you. So we'll go ahead and place down a rating scale, and then we'll place down a calculation tool. We'll leave this with just the 3 questions, simply because, to save the interest of saving time. And what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to open up our rating scale, and we're going to select the ratings drop down. For this to work with the calculation tool, you will need to use the custom option. And while we have this open, we'll just remove 2 of our answer choices as well, so that we only have to deal with 3. And we'll leave this at 0, 1, and we'll set that rate value for the satisfied as 2. The rate value is going to be the numbers that are calculated into that calculation tool. If you are using the calculation tool with just a selection option, you can absolutely do that. So maybe we have our single select option. We'll go ahead and get rid of these, just clear our space a little bit. Make it a little more clear about what I'm talking about at the moment. But we'll go ahead and place down, drop down, for instance. This can also be done with the single select yes or no questions as well. But that value that we've been talking about, that needs to be the same if you want to autofill. This is going to be the number that is output if you are using a selection option for the calculation tool. So maybe we have just these 2 options, but we'll have 1 and 2. Let's go ahead and add that 3rd option just so we have a similar setup to our other question. But I just want to demonstrate that you can also use this as well. It does not have to just be that rating scale. The calculation tool can calculate anything that has a value field. But to do this, again, we're going to use those brackets. So if we open it back up, our rating scale, we can see that we've set our values, and we have our questions and our question names. There are those randomized shortcodes again. So you know that we'll be using those. And to do that, we're just going to open our calculation tool. It will have an example for you here as a placeholder, but basically all we're going to need to do is just set down our brackets, and just a simple calculation for this one, we'll just add these all together. So we'll add bracket, plus sign, bracket, plus sign, bracket. And now we're just going to grab those shortcodes from our questions, and we can change these again. Maybe we want to do Q1, Q2, Q3. But again, if you have multiple questionnaires on your form, you're not going to want to use Q1, Q2, and Q3 again, because then those selections will overlap and be autofilled. So I always make sure to try to specify it to the questionnaire that I'm working on. If it's a PHQ-9, maybe it's P1, P2, P3. If it's a GAD-7, G1, G2, G3. Something that you know that you're not going to accidentally use elsewhere in the form. But since we just have this one today, we'll just use Q1, Q2, and Q3 for questions 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to take those shortcodes and we're going to place them into our brackets on our calculation expression for our calculation tool. So Q1, Q2, and Q3. Now, when we go to our style page, depending on the selection that we've made, it will update. It is not updating. That's because the calculation tool is going to need to be tested on a live form. So we can go back to that live version of our form by clicking the public link. And as soon as we get in here, now we can see that calculation tool is working properly. So you will need to test the calculation tool on a live version of the form. So if you are working with that, just go ahead and go through the saving process of publishing the packet and then just testing that out to make sure that it's working for you. The calculation tool is a very powerful tool, and it will calculate all functional mathematical equations, as long as they do not, of course, have any brackets in them, because the brackets are going to be what our system thinks is needing to pull information from something else. So if your calculation does have a set of brackets within it, I recommend adding a second calculation tool to calculate that bracketed formula, and then you can just use that the short code for that calculation in that bracketed section of your calculation expression, and it will work fine. You can calculate outputs of calculations. But just to go ahead and add another layer to this, we'll go ahead and add a minus sign, and we're going to add another set of brackets, and we're going to go ahead and grab that short code from the drop down, and we'll have our calculation subtract that selection from the added up rating scale. So we can go back to the style page, back to publish, back to account. My computer will wake up a little bit. All right. Make sure that got that in there. Publish and back to account to save those changes. And we'll go ahead and reopen that form. And now we can add these up. 3, 2, 2, 4, 6. And then we'll subtract our option here. So 3 was our value of 2, and it has subtracted that from our calculation. So as long as a field has the value or the rate value for the rating scale, you can utilize that with the calculation tool. And again, it will utilize that auto population functionality. I always like to talk about this a little bit whenever we do talk about autofill, just because the process is very much the same. All right. Oh, does look like we are running a little short on time, and we don't have any questions so far today. But that will conclude today's webinar on the autofill function. Just as a reminder, we do host these form building webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We do have a specific schedule set for those, and if you would like to keep up with that, you can always keep track of that by going to My Account, Support, and Search Guide. Once you get to the home page of our product guide, you'll just want to click on the FormDr updates down at the bottom right of that menu, and we'll have our webinar schedule over here on the left. The onboarding schedule, which we do on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, won't change too much, as this will be mostly onboarding information in terms of updating admin information, sending forms, managing users, and things like that. Again, that information won't change too much across those webinars. However, on Wednesdays, we are focusing a little bit more time on our new features, namely the synced forms, document signing, and the custom plans. So please see us on Wednesday if you would like more information on that. But our form building schedule will change, as mentioned earlier. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we'll be going over different types of information, more specifically to form building each time. Today, obviously, was about autofill. And on Thursday, we'll be going over advanced conditional questions in autofill, which we touched a little bit on today, but we'll get a little bit more into this Thursday. So please feel free to join us for that if you are interested. And if you are interested in joining us for any one of these, all you'll need to do is just click on the title of that. It will take you to a sign-up page for that day, and you'll be good to go. If there's anything that you would like the information on but won't be able to be in attendance for, don't worry, we will be posting those videos after the fact, and once we've posted them, it will say posted, click here, and then that will take you right to our YouTube channel, and we'll have some timestamps on those videos for you as well. And if you need to reach out to our support staff for any reason, you can do so in the section below. You'll have a drop down, for why you're reaching out. If you do have any documentation pertaining to your issue, that is all very helpful for our team, whether that's a screenshot or a video or even just some notes. That all is very helpful in our team's ability to assess what's going on and take care of that for you in a timely manner. And then, of course, the details. This is going to be the message that our team receives in that support ticket. So, of course, the more detailed to your issue, the more quickly our team will be able to take care of that for you. Once you've clicked that contact support button, you'll receive a ticket number. Our team will then reach out to you shortly after that to look into that and get that resolved for you. But all right, that will conclude us for this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. These are all free, as always, so if you have any coworkers or staff that would like to learn this information, please feel free to send them our way. But thank you very much for being here today, and hope to see you all again very soon. Hope you have a great afternoon.